There are moments in history when the world splits cleanly into before and after. For Arya Stark, that moment came on the steps of the great sept of Baelor, in the shadow of its 7 crystal towers, beneath a sky that seemed to hold its breath. Her father knelt in the sun. His hair, dark and streaked with grey, moved slightly in the wind. Around him, thousands pressed close, their voices a roar that crashed like waves against stone. She was small, buried in the crowd, her hand gripping the arm of a man she barely knew. Yoren, they called him. A brother of the Night's Watch, dressed in black, smelling of the road and old leather. He held her tight, too tight, and when she tried to pull away, his fingers dug into her shoulder like iron. "Don't look," he hissed. "Don't you look, boy." But she did. She always did. And she saw the sword rise, and she saw it fall, and she saw the world end. The crowd erupted. Some screamed, some cheered. The sound was monstrous, inhuman, a thing that seemed to come from the throat of the city itself. Arya did not scream. She could not. Her voice had fled somewhere deep inside her, somewhere she could not reach. Yoren yanked her backward, hauling her through the crush of bodies. She stumbled, nearly fell, caught herself. Her legs moved without her telling them to, one step, then another. The crowd swallowed them whole. "Move," Yoren growled. "Move or die here." She moved, through alleys that stank of rot and piss, through markets shuttered and silent, through streets she had walked 100 times, streets that now seemed strange and wrong, as if the city itself had turned against her. King's Landing had been her cage for months, but it had also been familiar. Now it was a trap with teeth. Gold cloaks prowled every corner. Red cloaks marched in formation. Lannister banners hung from windows like open wounds. The lions had won. The wolves were dead. Yoren did not stop until they reached Flea Bottom, where the streets narrowed, and the buildings leaned against each other like drunks. He pushed her into a cellar, dark and damp, where the air tasted of mould and old wood. A dozen boys sat in the gloom, filthy and hollow-eyed. They stared at her. She stared back. "This one's Ari," Yoren said, his voice flat. "A boy, like the rest of you. Anyone says different, I'll carve their tongue out and feed it to the crows." No one spoke. No one challenged him. Arya stood there, still and silent, her hands clenched into fists. Her hair had been chopped short days before, ragged and uneven. Her clothes were rough wool, too big, smelling of someone else's sweat. She looked like a boy. She had to. Girls were noticed. Girls were caught. Boys could disappear. That night she did not sleep. She sat with her back against the wall, her knees drawn up, her eyes open in the dark. The other boys whispered among themselves, their voices low and careful. Some were thieves. Some were bastards. Some were just unlucky. All of them were bound for the wall, for the Night's Watch, for a life of cold and darkness at the edge of the world. Arya did not care where they were going. She only cared that they were leaving. In the morning, Yoren gathered them in the grey light before dawn. There were 30 of them now, maybe more. Hard to count in the shadows. He moved among them, checking ropes, checking chains. 3 men wore iron collars, their wrists bound. "Murderers," someone whispered. "Rapers." Yoren did not explain. He did not need to. "We leave now," he said. "Quiet as mice. Any man makes noise, I'll gut him myself." They filed out into the streets, a ragged line of shadows. The city was waking slowly, smoke rising from chimneys, dogs barking in distant alleys. Arya walked near the middle of the group, her head down. her hands shoved into her pockets. She felt the weight of Needle against her leg, hidden beneath her cloak. The sword was all she had left of home, of Jon, of the girl she used to be. The gates loomed ahead, massive and ancient, guarded by men in gold cloaks. Yoren approached them with the easy confidence of a man who had done this 100 times. He showed them a paper, yellowed and creased. Words were exchanged, too low for Arya to hear. One of the guards glanced at the boys, his eyes sweeping over them without interest. Then he waved them through. Just like that, they were out. Beyond the walls, beyond the city. The King's Road stretched before them, wide and dusty, cutting through fields that had once been green. Now they were brown, trampled, empty. The war had passed this way. It had left its mark. They walked. Hours blurred together. The sun climbed, hot and merciless. Arya's feet ached. Her throat burned. She did not complain. None of them did. Complaining was weakness, and weakness got you noticed. She kept her eyes on the road, on the back of the boy ahead of her, on the horizon that never seemed to grow closer. By midday, they passed the first village. It was small, no more than a dozen, houses clustered around a well. But the houses were burned. The well was choked with ash. Bodies lay in the dirt, bloated and black with flies. Arya smelled them before she saw them. The stench was thick, cloying, impossible to escape. She covered her nose with her sleeve, but it did not help. "Don't stop," Yoren called. "Don't look. Keep moving." But they looked. How could they not? One body was a woman, her dress torn, her face frozen in a scream. Another was a child, no older than Bran. Arya's stomach twisted. She turned her head, but the image stayed with her, burned into her mind like a brand. "Who did this?" one of the boys whispered. "Does it matter?" Yoren said. "Lions, wolves, stags, they all burn the same." They walked faster after that. The road climbed into low hills, winding through fields that had once been farms. Now they were graveyards, crops rotted in the sun. Livestock lay dead in the grass, their bellies swollen and split. Here and there, a farmhouse still stood, but the doors hung open, the windows dark. No smoke rose from the chimneys, no voices called from within. Arya tried not to think about it, tried not to imagine the people who had lived here, tried not to see their faces. But her mind would not stop. She saw farmers running from soldiers. She saw mothers hiding children in cellars. She saw fire and blood and screaming. She saw her father's head rolling in the dust. She shook herself. Not now. Not here. She could not afford to break. That night, they camped in the ruins of an inn. The roof was gone, collapsed into the common room. The walls were scorched black. Yoren set a watch, 2 boys at a time, while the rest huddled together for warmth. There was no fire. Fire drew attention. Attention drew death. Arya sat apart from the others, her back against a crumbling wall. She pulled Needle from its hiding place and laid it across her lap. The blade gleamed faintly in the starlight. She ran her fingers along the steel, feeling the balance, the sharpness. Jon had given this to her. "Stick them with the pointy end," he had said, grinning. She wondered where he was now, if he was still alive, if any of them were. "Arry." She looked up. One of the boys stood over her, a skinny thing with a rat's face and quick eyes. Lommy, they called him. He sat down without asking, too close, his breath sour. "What do you want?" she said. "Just talking," he said. "Can't sleep, neither." She said nothing. After a moment, he spoke again. "You ever kill anyone?" The question startled her. She glanced at him, then away. "No," she said. "Me neither," Lomi said. "But I will. When we get to the wall, I mean. Wildlings and such. You?" "Maybe." He grinned, gap-toothed. "Bet you will. You got that look." "What look?" "Like you're already dead inside." Arya stared at him. Then she turned away, sliding needle back into its sheath. Lomi got the hint. He stood and wandered off, muttering to himself. Arya closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Instead, she whispered names into the dark, names she had begun to collect like stones. Joffrey, Cersei, Ilyn Payne, the Hound. She would remember them, all of them, and one day she would find them. The next morning, they woke to the sound of horses, distant at first, then closer. Yoren was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his sword. The boys scrambled up, groggy and confused. Arya grabbed Needle, her heart hammering in her chest. "Hide," Yoren said. "Now!" They scattered, diving into the ruins, pressing themselves into shadows. Arya crouched behind a broken wall, peering through a gap in the stone. The horses appeared on the road, a column of them, maybe 20. They wore red cloaks, Lannister men. They rode slowly, casually, as if they owned the world. And maybe they did. One of them called out, his voice carrying easily in the morning air. "Anyone here?" Silence. The wind stirred the grass. A crow cawed somewhere overhead. The rider dismounted, walking toward the inn. Thump. Boots crunched on broken glass. Arya held her breath, her fingers tight around Needle's hilt. The man stopped just a few feet from where she hid. He stood there, looking around, his hand resting on his sword. Then he laughed. A short, ugly sound. "Ghosts," he said. "Nothing but ghosts." He turned and walked back to his horse. The column moved on, disappearing down the road. Arya waited until the sound of hooves faded completely before she moved. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were cold. Yoren appeared from the shadows, his face grim. "That was close," he said. "Too close." They did not linger. They gathered their things and left the inn behind, moving faster now, more cautious. The road stretched on, endless and cruel. Every hill might hide soldiers. Every sound might be a trap. Arya walked with her hand near Needle, her eyes scanning the horizon. This was not a journey. It was a gauntlet, and she had only just begun. The King's Road had been built by kings, or so the stories said. Ancient men with crowns and armies, men who wanted to tie the realm together with stone and sweat. It ran straight as a spear from the wall to the south, cutting through forests and fields, over rivers and hills. It was supposed to be safe, protected, a road where merchants could travel without fear, where lords could ride in peace, where small folk could move from one village to another without looking over their shoulders. That was the story. The truth was different now. The truth was blood and ash. Yoren's band moved like hunted animals, always watching, always listening. They walked before dawn and rested when the sun climbed too high. They avoided open ground, kept to the edges of the road, stayed near trees where they could scatter if riders appeared. Every step north was a small victory. Every day without trouble was a gift they did not take for granted. But trouble found them anyway. It always did. The first real attack came on the 4th day. They were passing through a stretch of burned farmland, the fields black and still smoking in places. The smell hung in the air, thick and bitter, like the world itself was rotting. Arya walked with her head down, trying not to breathe too deeply. The other boys were quiet. Even Lomi had stopped his endless chatter. Then the arrows came, The first one hissed past Arya's head and buried itself in the dirt. She froze, not understanding. Then Yoren was screaming, "Down! Get down!" Arya threw herself to the ground as more arrows fell, a rain of black shafts striking all around them. One boy cried out, clutching his leg. Another ran, panicking, and an arrow took him in the back. He fell and did not move. Arya pressed herself flat, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The arrows stopped. Silence fell, broken only by the moaning of the wounded boy. Then hoofbeats, heavy and slow, deliberate. Arya lifted her head just enough to see. 6 riders emerged from the tree line, maybe 100 yards away. They wore mismatched armor, dented and stained. No banners, no colors, just men with swords and bows, men who had decided that might made right. "Stand up," one of them called. His voice was rough, amused. "Let's see what we caught." Yoren rose slowly, his hands away from his weapons. The boys got to their feet one by one, trembling, eyes wide. Arya stood with them, her hand itching to draw a needle. But Yoren caught her eye and shook his head, just barely. Not yet. The riders approached, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Their leader was a big man with a scarred face and a smile that showed too many teeth. He looked them over like a farmer inspecting livestock. "Night's watch," he said, nodding at Yoren's black cloak. "Taking recruits north, are you?" "That's right," Yoren said. His voice was calm, steady. "These boys are bound for the wall. King's business." The scarred man laughed. "King's business? Which king would that be? The boy who calls himself Joffrey? The boy who calls himself Robb? Maybe the one in the Stormlands, or the one in the Reach? So many kings these days, hard to keep track." "The law says—" "The law's dead," the scarred man interrupted. "Died with the old king. Maybe before. What matters now is steel and numbers. And friend, you don't have enough of either." He gestured at the boys. "Strip them. Take anything worth taking. Weapons, coin, boots if they're good. Leave them their shirts and breeches. We're not monsters." His men dismounted, moving toward the boys with easy confidence. Arya's hand went to needle, but Yoren grabbed her wrist, squeezing hard enough to hurt. "Don't," he whispered. "Not unless you want to die here." One of the men reached for hot pie, the fat baker's boy who had cried himself to sleep every night since King's Landing. Hot Pie stumbled backward, raising his hands. "Please," he said, "I got nothing worth." The man hit him. A casual backhand that sent Hot Pie sprawling in the dirt. Blood ran from his nose. He curled into a ball, sobbing. Arya felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Not any more. Something harder. Something that tasted like iron. "Enough," Yoren said. He stepped forward, his voice sharp. "These boys are under my protection. You want a fight, you'll get one. But it won't be the easy robbery you're hoping for." The scarred man studied him for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "You're right," he said. "It won't be easy. It'll be quick." He drew his sword. The other men did the same. Yoren's hand went to his own blade, but he did not draw it. Not yet. The moment stretched. Arya could hear her own breathing, fast and shallow. Could see the flies buzzing around the dead boy in the road. Could feel the sun burning the back of her neck. Then one of the riders spoke, a younger man with a nervous face. "Harwin," he said, "riders coming?" Everyone turned. In the distance, dust rose from the road. A lot of it. More horses, moving fast. The scarred. Man cursed. Gold cloaks or lions? Can't tell yet. Damn. He looked at Yoren, then at the approaching dust. Whatever calculation he made came down against a fight. Another time, Crow. Tell your boys they got lucky. They mounted and rode off, disappearing into the trees as quickly as they had come. Yoren watched them go, his jaw tight. Then he turned to the boys. Help him up, he said, nodding at Hot Pie. We're moving. Now. They did not wait to see who the riders were. They left the road entirely, cutting east into the forest. The trees closed around them, thick and dark. Arya walked in silence, her mind churning. The robbery had been so casual, so easy. 6 men had nearly taken everything, and there had been nothing they could do, nothing but submit or die. That night, they camped without fire again. The wounded boy died just after sunset, his breath rattling in his chest until it stopped. Yoren wrapped him in his cloak and buried him in a shallow grave. No one knew his name. He had been just another orphan, another bastard, another piece of human refuse swept up for the wall. Arya sat with her back against a tree, needle across her lap. She thought about the scarred man's words. The law's dead. Was he right? Had it ever been alive? Really? Her father had believed in law, in justice, in doing what was right. And where had it gotten him? Ari. She looked up. It was Gendry, the bull-headed apprentice with the strong arms and the suspicious eyes. He was older than the other boys, maybe 16, and he kept to himself most of the time. Now he crouched beside her, his voice low. You all right? Fine, she said. You were going to fight them, he said. Weren't you? I saw your hand on your sword. She did not answer. That would have been stupid, Gendry said. They would have killed you. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. He paused, then added, but I would have fought too, if it came to it. Arya glanced at him. There was no bravado in his voice, no pride, just a simple statement of fact. She nodded once. Good, she said. He stood and walked away. Arya watched him go, then looked back down at Needle. The blade caught the moonlight, gleaming soft and deadly. Stick them with the pointy end. She would, when the time came. The attacks did not stop. Over the next week, they were harassed 3 more times. Once by a group of farmers turned bandits, desperate men with pitchforks and axes who demanded food. Yoren gave them what little they could spare, and the men let them pass. Once by Lannister outriders who questioned them and searched their belongings before riding on, laughing among themselves. And once by men wearing no colours at all, ghosts in the night who threw stones and vanished before Yoren could organise a response. The land itself seemed to be dying. Every village they passed was abandoned or burned. Every farm was picked clean. The smallfolk were gone, fled or dead, or hiding in the woods. The war had swept through like a plague, and it had left nothing behind but corpses and crows. Arya saw things she would never forget. A child's doll lying in the ashes of a house, a woman's body hanging from a tree, her face black and swollen, a dog eating something in a ditch, something that might have been a hand. The sights piled up in her mind, one after another, until she stopped trying to look away. What was the point? The horror was everywhere. At night, she added new names to her list. Not people, exactly. Ideas, the war, the king, the gods who let this happen. She whispered them into the dark, a prayer that was also a curse. On the 9th day, they reached a river. The water was low and slow, choked with debris. Something floated in the middle, bloated and pale. Arya did not look too closely. She did not want to know if it was a person. They crossed at a ford, the water rising to their knees. The current tugged at them, weak but insistent. Arya kept her eyes on the far bank, on the trees waiting there. Almost across, almost safe. Then Lomi slipped. He went under with a yelp, his arms flailing. The current caught him, pulling him downstream. Arya reacted without thinking. She lunged after him, grabbing his arm, hauling him up. He coughed and sputtered, clutching at her. "Thanks," he gasped. "Thanks, Arry." She nodded, too breathless to speak. They made it to the bank together, dripping and shaking. Gendry helped them up, his big hands steadying them. "Careful," he said. "River's got bodies in it. Don't want to drink that water." Arya looked back at the river. The floating thing had drifted closer. She could see it clearly now. It was a man, or had been. His face was gone, eaten away by fish or time. She turned away, her stomach churning. They camped on the far side of the river, huddled together in the growing dark. Yoren sat apart, sharpening his knife with long, slow strokes. The sound was rhythmic, almost soothing. Arya watched him, wondering what he was thinking. If he regretted taking this job, if he thought they would make it to the wall. She wanted to ask, but she did not. Some questions had no good answers. That night the rain came, cold and hard, drumming on the leaves, turning the ground to mud. They had no shelter, no cover. They simply endured, shivering and miserable, until dawn broke grey and cold. When morning came, Yoren gathered them together. His face was grim. "We're 10 days from Harrenhal," he said. "Maybe less. Lord Tywin's camped there with his army. We'll have to pass close. Keep your heads down, your mouths shut. Any man draws attention to us, I'll kill him myself. Understood?" They nodded. They understood. Harrenhal was a cursed place. Everyone knew that. And now it held lions. They would have to walk through the shadow of the beast. Arya looked north, toward the road ahead, toward the future that waited. She felt the weight of Needle at her side, the names in her head, the hardness growing in her heart. The road burned, the kingdom bled, and she walked on. They smelled Harrenhal before they saw it. Smoke and rot, and something worse, something that had no name but lived in the back of the throat like poison. The smell grew stronger with each mile until it seemed to coat everything, their clothes, their skin, their very breath. Arya walked with her hand over her nose, but it did nothing. The stench was inside her now. "What is that?" Hot Pie whispered, his face pale. "Death," Yoren said. He did not elaborate. The castle appeared through the trees like a broken tooth. 5 towers, each one massive beyond reason, each one melted and twisted at the top, as if a god had reached down and squeezed them like clay. The walls stretched impossibly high, black stone that seemed to drink the light. Even from a distance, Arya could feel the weight of the place, the wrongness of it. Harrenhal was not just cursed. It was a wound in the world. They were not going to the castle by choice. Lannister soldiers found them on the road, a patrol of 20 men in red cloaks with lions on their shields. There was no fight this time, no chance to run. Yoren tried to talk, to explain about the Night's Watch, about the king's business. But the officer just laughed. "The king wants men," he said. "And you've got them. Consider it a gift to the crown." They were marched to Harrenhal in chains, not iron chains, but rope that cut into wrists and made walking difficult. Arya stumbled twice, caught herself, kept moving. Around her, the other boys were silent. Even Lomi had stopped complaining. Fear had stolen their voices. The gates of Harrenhal were open, a vast mouth of darkness. They passed through, and the world changed. Inside, the castle was a city unto itself, a sprawl of buildings and yards and makeshift pens. Soldiers were everywhere, thousands of them, moving with the casual brutality of men who knew they were untouchable. Tents covered the courtyards. Fires burned in the open. The smell was worse here, so thick Arya gagged. They were taken to a yard near the kitchens and made to stand in a line. A thin man in a blood-stained apron walked down the row, looking them over like livestock. He stopped in front of Gendry, prodded his arm, nodded, moved on to Arya. His eyes were cold, calculating. "This one's small," he said. "Boy's tough," Yoren said quickly. "Good worker." The thin man grunted. "We'll see. Take them to the barracks. Put them to work in the morning." The barracks were a long stone building with a roof that leaked and floors covered in straw that smelled of piss. 50 boys and men were crammed inside, some from other groups the Lannisters had swept up, some who had been here for weeks. They stared at the new arrivals with hollow eyes. Arya found a corner and sat down, her back against the wall. Gendry sat beside her, and Hot Pie on the other side. They did not speak. There was nothing to say. That first night she learned what Harrenhal truly was. Screaming woke her just after midnight, high and terrible, coming from somewhere deep in the castle. It went on, rising and falling, until it finally cut off with a wet, choking sound. Then silence. Arya lay in the dark, her heart hammering, waiting for it to start again. It did not, but she knew it would. Tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. The screaming was constant here. It was part of the castle, like the walls and the towers. In the morning, they were put to work. Arya was sent to the kitchens, a cavernous space filled with smoke and heat and the smell of boiling meat. She hauled water, scrubbed pots, chopped vegetables with a dull knife that made her hands ache. The work was endless. The cooks yelled and struck anyone who moved too slowly. By midday, Arya's arms trembled. By evening, she could barely stand. But she did stand. She watched. She listened. She learned. Harrenhal was a machine that ran on suffering. Prisoners worked until they collapsed, then were dragged away and replaced. Soldiers took what they wanted, food or drink or flesh, and no one stopped them. The lords lived in the high halls, dining on roasted meat while the rest of the castle starved. And in the centre of it all, in the Tower of Dread, Lord Tywin Lannister held court. Arya saw him once, from a distance. He rode through the yard on a white horse, his back straight, his face carved from stone. He looked like a king. No, not a king. Something colder, a force of nature. Men scattered before him, pressing themselves against walls, lowering their eyes. Even the soldiers feared him. She hated him. The hate was clean and pure and almost comforting. It gave her something to hold on to in the chaos. The days blurred together. Wake before dawn, work until dark, eat whatever scraps could be stolen, sleep in the stinking barracks, wake and do it again. Arya stopped counting. Time lost meaning. But the screaming never stopped. It came from the dungeons, from the interrogation rooms, from the Widow's Tower, where the torturers did their work. Sometimes Arya could hear words in the screaming. Pleas for mercy, names of family members, prayers to gods who did not answer. She learned not to react, not to flinch, not to look. The other servants had already learned this lesson. They moved through the castle like ghosts, silent and invisible, because visibility meant danger. Arya became a ghost too. She kept her head down, her mouth shut, her eyes on the ground, and she survived. 3 weeks in, she was pulled from the kitchens and sent to serve in the hall. This was considered a promotion. The work was easier, the food better, but it came with a price. She would be close to them now, the lions, the men who gave the orders, who decided who lived and who screamed. The great hall of Harrenhal could seat 1,000 men. Now it held perhaps 300 officers and knights and lordlings who dined at long tables while servants moved among them with wine and meat. Arya carried a pitcher of water, refilling cups when they emptied, trying not to be noticed. She learned their faces. Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, a giant of a man who broke bones when he was bored. Sir Amory Lorch, who had killed Princess Rhaenys, who smiled when he gave orders to the torturers. Polliver, Raff, Chiswick, men whose names she added to her list, men who joked about rape and murder like other men joked about dice. And Lord Tywin himself, seated at the high table, his face expressionless, his eyes missing nothing. He rarely spoke. When he did, men jumped to obey. His voice was quiet, controlled, more terrifying than any scream. One night, Arya stood behind his chair, pitcher in hand, while he discussed the war with his captains. They talked about Robb, about her brother, and their words were full of contempt. The young wolf, they called him, mocking, a boy playing at war. Tywin listened, sipping his wine, saying nothing. Then he set down his cup and spoke. "The boy has won every battle and is losing the war," he said. "He has courage but no strategy. He will break himself against us, and when he does, the North will fall." Arya's hand tightened on the pitcher. She wanted to throw it in his face, wanted to scream that Robb would destroy them all. But she did not. She stood still, invisible, a ghost serving ghosts. After the meal, as she was clearing cups, she heard them again, the screams. Closer now, coming from somewhere beneath the hall, fresh screams, raw and desperate. The lords did not react. They kept eating, kept drinking, kept talking. The screaming was background noise to them, no more remarkable than the crackling of the fire. Arya felt something break inside her, not her spirit, something deeper. Some last piece of childhood, some belief that the world had rules, that cruelty had limits. It broke, and in its place grew something hard and cold. She carried the cups to the kitchen and set them down. Her hands did not shake. They should have, but they did not. That night, lying in the barracks, she whispered her list. The names had grown longer. Joffrey, Cersei, Ilyn Payne, the Hound, the Mountain, Polliver, Raff, Chiswick, Tywin Lannister. She spoke each name carefully, precisely, giving it weight. This was not prayer. It was a promise. The next day brought a new horror. A prisoner was dragged into the yard, a man who had been caught trying to escape. They tied him to a post and beat him while the soldiers watched. He begged, he wept, he promised information, gold, anything. They beat him until he could not speak, then left him there, broken and bleeding. Arya saw him when she crossed the yard that evening. He was still alive, barely, his breath coming in short gasps. His eyes found hers, pleading. She looked away and kept walking. There was nothing she could do, nothing anyone could do. That was the lesson of Harrenhal. Mercy was a luxury no one could afford. But then something changed. A thin man with strange eyes arrived at the castle, a prisoner in a cage, with 2 others. Arya saw the cage when it was brought through the gates. saw the men inside, filthy and desperate. One of them looked at her, and she looked back, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or something else. His name was Jaqen Hagar. She learned this later, after she saved him. The cage caught fire one night, an accident or sabotage, and the 3 men inside screamed to be released. The guards laughed and walked away. Arya ran to them, grabbed an axe, broke the lock. The men fled into the darkness. Jaqen Hagar stayed long enough to look at her. "A girl has saved 3 lives," he said. His voice was soft, almost musical. 3 lives were owed to the Red God. 3 deaths must be paid. A girl may name the names, and a man will do the rest. Then he was gone, melting into the shadows. Arya stood there, the axe still in her hands, not understanding. Not yet. But she would. In the days that followed, Jaqen appeared again, working in the castle, quiet and unnoticed. And when she finally understood what he was offering, when she realized he would kill anyone she named, she felt a surge of power so intense it frightened her. 3 names, 3 deaths. She had so many names on her list. How could she choose? She chose carefully. The first was Chiswick, who had laughed about raping a girl. He died falling from a wall, drunk, they said. Accident. The second was Weiss, her overseer, who beat servants for sport. He died when his own dogs turned on him, tearing out his throat. Madness, they said. Bad luck. Each death was perfect. Each death was invisible. And each death taught Arya something new about power. Real power was not armies or castles. It was knowing when to strike, knowing who to kill, knowing how to vanish. Harrenhal changed her. The castle ground her down and built her back up into something new, something harder. She learned to lie without blinking, to steal without being seen, to watch men die without feeling anything at all. The screaming stopped bothering her. The smell stopped mattering. She became part of Harrenhal, and Harrenhal became part of her. And through it all, one truth burned in her mind, bright and certain. Banners changed, lords rose and fell. But cruelty was constant. It did not matter if the castle flew lions or wolves or dragons. The weak would suffer, the strong would feast. And justice was whatever the man with the sword said it was. Arya would remember that. She would carry it with her, along with her list, along with Needle, along with all the names of the dead. Harrenhal was a castle of screams, and she had learned to stop screaming. Escape from Harrenhal came like a dream, half remembered. One moment Arya was serving wine to monsters. The next, she was running through darkness with Gendry and Hot Pie stumbling behind her. Jaqen Hagar had used his 3rd death to help them flee, opening gates that should have been locked, silencing guards who should have raised alarms. Then he was gone, vanished like smoke. And they were alone in the night with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the knowledge that Harrenhal would send riders after them. They ran until their lungs burned, through forests that clawed at their clothes, across streams that soaked them to the bone, over hills that seemed endless in the dark. When dawn broke grey and cold, they were miles from the castle, but not nearly far enough. Arya could still smell it on her skin, in her hair. The stench of Harrenhal would not wash away so easily. "We need to rest," Hot Pie wheezed. He was bent over, hands on his knees, his face red and slick with sweat. "We need to keep moving," Arya said. Her legs ached, but fear kept her upright. "They'll be looking for us." "Let them look," Gendry said. He was breathing hard, but still standing straight, his jaw set. We'll hear horses long before they find us." They found a hollow beneath an old oak and collapsed into it, too exhausted to care about comfort. Arya sat with Needle across her lap, listening to the forest. Birds called in the canopy. Wind rustled the leaves. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. But she did not trust them. They stayed hidden through the day, taking turns sleeping while one kept watch. When night fell again, they moved on, heading north and west, away from the King's Road, away from anything that might have soldiers. The land here was wild, untouched by war, or so Arya thought. On the third day, they found a village, small, just a dozen cottages clustered around a well. But the cottages were intact, smoke rising from chimneys. People moved in the streets. Real people, not soldiers or bandits. For a moment, Arya felt something close to hope. Then she saw the bodies hanging from the tree. 3 men dangling from ropes, their faces black and swollen. A sign hung around one neck, crude letters carved into wood. Thief. Another said rapist. The third just said Lannister man. Hot Pie stopped dead. Oh gods, oh gods. Keep walking, Gendry muttered. Don't stare. They approached the well cautiously. An old woman was drawing water, her back bent, her hands gnarled with age. She looked at them without fear, without much interest at all. "You've got the look of runners," she said. Her voice was dry as old leather. "We're just passing through," Arya said carefully. "Most folks are these days." The woman nodded at the hanging men. The Brotherhood did that 3 days ago, said they were bringing the king's justice to the smallfolk, since the king won't. "The Brotherhood?" Gendry asked. "Outlaws," the woman said. She hauled up her bucket, water sloshing over the sides. "They call themselves the Brotherhood without banners. Lightning Lord leads them, or so they say. They take from the rich, hang the wicked, protect the weak." She spat into the dirt. "Sometimes they do. Sometimes they just hang whoever's convenient." She walked away, leaving them standing by the well. Arya looked up at the bodies, then at the village beyond. The people here seemed calm, going about their business as if 3 corpses swaying in the wind were perfectly normal. Maybe they were now. Maybe this was what justice looked like when the realm was broken. They filled their water skins and left quickly. Arya did not like this place, did not like the way the villagers watched them, silent and measuring, did not like the bodies, or the idea of outlaws dispensing their own version of the king's justice. But the Brotherhood found them anyway. It happened 2 days later, in a clearing beside a stream. They had stopped to rest, to eat the last of the bread they had stolen from Harrenhal's kitchens. The bread was stale and hard, but it was food. They were tearing into it when the arrows appeared, striking the ground at their feet. "Don't move," a voice called from the trees. "Hands where we can see them." Arya's hand went to Needle, but Gendry caught her wrist. "Don't," he said quietly. "We're surrounded." He was right. Men emerged from the forest, a dozen of them, maybe more. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons that had seen hard use. No banners, no colors, just men who looked like they had been fighting for a very long time. At their head was a tall man with a battered breastplate and a sword at his hip. His face was worn, lined with scars, but his eyes were steady. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was not unkind, but it was not gentle either. "Nobody," Arya said. "Just travelers." "Travelers don't carry swords," the man said, nodding at Needle. "And they don't move like you move. You've had training. You're not smallfolk." Arya said nothing. The man studied her, then Gendry, then Hot Pie, who was trying very hard not to cry. "You ran from somewhere," the man said. "Let me guess. Harrenhal." The word hung in the air like a curse. Arya felt her stomach tighten. "Maybe," she said. The man's expression softened slightly. "Then you've been through hell. But that doesn't tell me who you are, or why I shouldn't kill you as spies." "We're not spies," Gendry said, his voice hard. "We're prisoners who escaped. We're just trying to get north." "North?" The man considered this. "To the Starks." Arya's heart jumped, but she kept her face blank. "Why would we go to the Starks?" "Because the lions are south and west, the stags are east, and the Freys hold the twins. North is the only place left." He paused. "I'm Thoros of Myr, once a priest, now a brother of the Brotherhood without banners, and you three are coming with us." It was not a request. They were taken deeper into the forest, to a camp hidden in a hollow, where a stream ran clear and cold. More men waited there, perhaps 30 in all, along with a few women and children. They looked like refugees, like survivors, not an army. But they were armed, and they were organized. In the center of the camp stood a man who made Arya stop and stare. He was tall and thin, wrapped in a cloak that might have once been fine, but was now tattered and stained. His face was gaunt, almost skeletal, and a black patch covered one eye. But it was not his appearance that struck her. It was the way the others looked at him, with reverence and fear mixed together. "Lord Beric," Thoros said, approaching him, "we found 3 runners from Harrenhal." The one-eyed man turned. His remaining eye was grey and piercing, looking through Arya rather than at her. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried weight. "Harrenhal," he said the word like a prayer. "Then you have seen the worst of what this war has wrought." "We've seen enough," Arya said. Beric Dondarrion, the Lightning Lord, smiled faintly. "I doubt that. The war has depths yet to be plumbed. But you are safe here, for now. The Brotherhood doesn't harm children." They were given food, real food, not scraps, bread and cheese and salted pork. Arya ate slowly, watching the camp, trying to understand what she was seeing. These men called themselves the Brotherhood Without, banners, claimed to fight for justice, for the small folk. But they were still outlaws, still men with swords who took what they wanted. That night, she watched them hold a trial. They brought in a prisoner, a fat merchant who had been caught selling supplies to the Lannisters. He protested, claimed he had no choice, that soldiers would have killed him if he refused. Beric listened in silence, his face unreadable. Then he asked questions, simple questions, and with each answer the merchant's lies unravelled. "You sold them grain," Beric said. "Grain taken from farmers who are now starving." "I paid them," the merchant said desperately. "Fair price. Fair price." Beric's voice did not rise, but it cut like a blade. "Fair price when their children are dying of hunger. Fair price when you profit from their suffering. Tell me, merchant, what is a fair price for a child's life?" The merchant had no answer. Beric nodded to his men. They took the merchant away. The next morning, he hung from a tree, a sign around his neck, "Profiteer." Arya watched the body sway in the wind. She thought about the old woman's words. Sometimes they protect the weak. Sometimes they just hang whoever's convenient. Which was this? Justice or convenience? She did not know. And that uncertainty gnawed at her. The Brotherhood moved constantly, never staying in one place more than a few days. Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie travelled with them, not as prisoners, but not quite as free people either. They were kept close, watched, questioned. The Brotherhood wanted to know where they had come from, who they were, what they had seen. Arya told them as little as possible. She did not trust easily anymore. Harrenhal had burned that out of her, but she watched them, watched how they operated. They raided Lannister supply trains, took the food and coin and distributed it to villages. They hunted down soldiers who preyed on smallfolk, gave them quick trials, and hanged them. They sang songs about justice and the king's peace, about a realm where lords protected instead of exploited. It was a beautiful lie, and parts of it were true, but only parts. Arya saw the other side too, saw them beat a man who refused to give information, saw them burn a farmhouse because the farmer had fed Lannister soldiers, saw them argue among themselves about who deserved mercy and who deserved rope, and saw how arbitrary those decisions often were. One night, she spoke with Thoros by the fire. The Red Priest was drinking, as he often did, his face flushed with wine. "You hang people," Arya said, "just like the Lannisters." Thoros looked at her, his eyes surprisingly clear despite the drink. "Yes," he said, "we do." "Then how are you different?" "We hang guilty men," Thoros said. "The Lannisters hang whoever they please." "Who decides guilt?" Thoros smiled, sad and knowing. "That, child, is the question, isn't it? We do our best. We hear the accused. We weigh the evidence. But in the end, yes, we decide. And sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we hang an innocent man, and the gods judge us for it. Then why do it at all?" "Because the alternative is worse," Thoros said. "The alternative is chaos. Is soldiers raping and killing without consequence? Is lords treating small folk like cattle? Someone has to stand against that. Someone has to say no, even if we are imperfect, even if we are wrong sometimes." Arya thought about that. It made a kind of sense. But it also made her uneasy. A week into their time with the Brotherhood, Beric called Arya to him. They sat alone beneath a tree, the camp busy around them. "Thoros tells me you carry a sword," Beric said. Arya's hand went to Needle. "It's mine." "I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking why you carry it." She met his eye, the grey one that seemed to see too much. "To kill people." Beric did not flinch. "Which people?" "The ones on my list." "Ah?" He nodded slowly. "And this list, it grows longer each day, I'd wager." "Yes." "Good," Beric said, surprising her. "Hold on to that. Hold on to your anger, your desire for justice. But be careful. Anger can keep you alive, or it can consume you. The difference is whether you control it, or it controls you." Arya frowned. "You want me to forget?" "No. Never forget. But don't let revenge be all you are. Don't let it hollow you out until there's nothing left but hate." He paused, his voice dropping. "I've died 6 times, child. Each time I come back a little less, a little more hollow. Don't make my mistake. Don't lose yourself in the killing." She did not understand what he meant about dying. Not then. But she would. 3 days later, the Hound came. They were camped near a river when the scouts brought him in, hands bound, surrounded by a dozen men with spears. Sandor Clegane looked exactly as Arya remembered, scarred and brutal, and radiating violence even in chains. When he saw her, his eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "You," he said. "Me," Arya said. Her hand was on a needle before she thought about it. The Brotherhood brought the Hound before Beric for trial. They accused him of murder, of serving the Lannisters, of being the loyal dog of House Clegane. The Hound admitted to all of it, admitted he had killed, admitted he had burned and raped and done every terrible thing they accused him of. "But not the boy," he said, his voice like gravel. "I didn't kill the butcher's boy. That was your precious Lightning Lord's people, not me." The trial descended into chaos. The Hound demanded trial by combat. Beric accepted. They fought by firelight, sword against flaming sword, and Arya watched with her heart in her throat. She wanted the Hound dead, wanted to see him burn. But he won. He killed Beric Dondarrion, drove his sword through the man's chest, left him bleeding in the dirt. And then Beric stood up. Arya watched, frozen, as Thoros knelt beside the corpse and whispered prayers. Watched as Beric's chest rose, as his eye opened, as he lived again. Impossible, but real. The Hound was released, bound by the trial's outcome. He left immediately, disappearing into the night. And Arya was left with questions that had no answers. The Brotherhood without banners was supposed to be justice, supposed to be hope. But they were just men, flawed men, making impossible choices, trying to hold back the tide with broken swords. Arya stayed with them for another week. Then the Hound returned, captured her, threw her over his horse, and rode away. The Brotherhood did not pursue. They had larger concerns, larger battles. As the camp disappeared behind her, Arya looked back once. She saw the banners, the fires, the men who sang about justice, and she felt nothing but emptiness. Outlaw justice was still just men with swords, deciding who lived and who died. The Brotherhood was better than the Lannisters, maybe, but better was not good. Better was not enough. And Arya was learning that nothing would ever be enough. The Hound rode hard for 3 days, stopping only when the horse needed rest. Arya sat in front of him on the saddle, his arm locked around her waist like an iron bar. She did not struggle. There was no point. He was too strong, the horse too fast, and the wilderness too vast. So she sat silent and still, watching the land pass by, planning how she would kill him. It would not be easy. The Hound slept light and kept her weapons far from her reach. Needle was tied to his saddle, just out of her grasp, a constant reminder of her helplessness. At night he bound her hands and feet with rope that cut into her skin. In the morning he untied her, and they rode again. No conversation, no explanation, just endless miles of burned and broken land. On the 4th day, he finally spoke. "Stop looking at me like that," he said. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. "Like what?" Arya asked. "Like you're measuring my neck for a noose." He laughed, a harsh sound. "You want to kill me. I know. You've wanted to kill me since King's Landing, maybe before." "You killed Micah," Arya said. The words came out flat, cold. "The butcher's boy. He was my friend." "I know who he was." The Hound was quiet for a moment, then added, "And I know what the prince told me to do. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not sorry either. That's the world, girl. The strong take what they want, and the weak die. Your butcher's boy was weak." Arya felt rage flood through her, hot and violent. He was innocent. So. The Hound's arm tightened around her waist. "You think innocence matters. You think the gods care. Look around you. This whole kingdom is burning, and most of the people dying never did anything wrong. They're just in the way." Arya said nothing. She looked at the land spreading before them, at the villages reduced to ash, at the fields lying fallow and dead. He was right. She hated that he was right. "Where are you taking me?" she asked finally. "To your mother," the hound said. "To the young wolf. They'll pay a pretty ransom for Ned Stark's daughter. I'll be rich, and you'll be safe. Everybody wins. I'll kill you before we get there. You can try." He sounded almost amused. "But you won't. You're smart, girl, smarter than most. You know you need me right now. Out here alone, you'd last maybe a day before some soldier or bandit found you. With me, you've got a chance." Arya hated that he was right about that too. They rode through the Riverlands, and with each mile the devastation grew worse. This was the heart of the war, the place where armies had marched and fought and bled for 2 years. The land looked like it had been skinned alive. Every village they passed was empty or burned. Every farm was stripped bare. The people were gone, fled or dead, or hiding in the woods like animals. Sometimes they saw bodies, hanging from trees, rotting in ditches, scattered across fields where battles had been fought and forgotten. The corpses were old now, picked clean by crows and dogs, just bones, and rags left behind. But there were fresh bodies too, new dead. The war was not over. It was still feeding. One afternoon they came upon a river. The water ran slow and brown, choked with debris. Arya saw something floating in the middle and looked away quickly. She knew what it was. The hound saw it too, but said nothing. He guided the horse upstream, looking for a place to cross. They found a ford, shallow enough to wade. The horse picked its way carefully, the water rising to its belly. Halfway across, the hound stopped. Arya looked at him, confused. "What?" "Quiet," he hissed. Then she heard it. Voices, laughter, coming from the far bank, hidden in the trees. The hound backed the horse up slowly, moving toward the near shore. But it was too late. Men emerged from the forest, a dozen of them, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons. Soldiers, or bandits, or both. It hardly mattered. Their leader was a young man with a scar across his cheek and eyes that held no mercy. He grinned when he saw the hound. "Well, well," he said. "What do we have here? A dog and his bitch." The hound's hand went to his sword. "Ride away," he said. "I've got no quarrel with you." "But we've got one with you," the scarred man said. "That's fine armor you're wearing. Fine horse too. And the girl looks like she might be worth something." "Last chance," the hound said. The scarred man laughed and drew his sword. The others did the same, spreading out along the bank. 12 against 1. The hound had no chance. Arya knew it. He knew it too. But he drew his sword anyway. "Hold on," he told her. Then he kicked the horse forward, straight at them. What followed was chaos and blood. The hound fought like something inhuman, his sword a blur of steel. He cut down the first man before the others could react, then the second, then the third. The horse screamed and reared, striking out with its hooves. Arya clung to the saddle, her heart in her throat, as the hound carved through them. But there were too many. A spear caught the horse in the side, and it went down, throwing them both. Arya hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. She rolled, gasping, trying to see. The hound was on his feet, blood streaming from a cut on his arm, still fighting. 2 men were dead at his feet. 3 more circled him, cautious now, afraid. Arya saw Needle, still tied to the fallen horse's saddle. She crawled toward it, her hands shaking, untied the knots. The sword came free. She turned, looking for a target. One of the men saw her and lunged. Arya reacted without thinking. "Stick them with the pointy end." Needle punched through his leather jerkin, sliding between his ribs. The man's eyes went wide. He looked down at the blade in his chest, then at Arya. Then he fell. Arya stood there, needle dripping red, her whole body trembling. She'd killed before, but not like this. Not face to face. Not watching the light leave their eyes. The hound killed the last two men and stood panting, his sword dark with blood. He looked at Arya, at the body at her feet, and nodded. "Good," he said. "Now you know." "Know what?" Her voice came out small. "How easy it is." He wiped his blade on a dead man's cloak. "How little it means. You put steel in a man and he dies. That's all. No lightning from the gods. No justice. Just meat and blood. And the end." Arya looked down at the corpse. The man's face was ordinary, young. He might have been a farmer once, or a smith's apprentice. Now he was nothing. They left the bodies where they lay and walked until they found another horse, a half-starved mare, wandering loose in a field. The hound caught it easily, and they rode on, slower now, both of them bleeding, both silent. That night, they made camp in the ruins of a barn. The roof was half gone, but the walls provided some shelter from the wind. The hound built a small fire and tended to his wounds, stitching the cut on his arm with practiced efficiency. Arya watched him, noting how calm he was, how steady his hands. He had done this many times before. "You should clean that," he said, nodding at the blood on her hands. "It'll stink otherwise." Arya looked down. Her hands were dark with dried blood, the man's blood. She had forgotten about it. She walked to a nearby stream and scrubbed her skin raw, but the stain would not come out completely. It had settled into the lines of her palms, the creases of her knuckles. When she came back, the hound was eating hard bread and dried meat. He tossed her a piece without looking at her. "Eat," he said. "We've got a long way to go." "How long?" Arya asked. "To the twins. Week, maybe 2. Depends on how many more fights we run into." He chewed slowly, his scarred face thoughtful in the firelight. "Your brother's there. Got himself married to some Frey girl, securing his alliances, they say. Smart move, if the Freys can be trusted, which they can't." Arya's heart jumped. Robb, her brother, alive. She had not let herself hope, had not let herself think about him, because thinking hurt too much. But now, "He'll kill you," she said. "When he sees you, when he knows what you did, he'll cut your head off." The hound shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe he'll pay me and let me go. Lords are practical people. They understand coin. Not Robb. Robb's different. We'll see." The hound lay back, his hands behind his head. "Get some sleep. We leave at dawn." Arya did not sleep. She sat by the fire, needle across her lap, and thought about Robb, thought about seeing him again, about being safe, about going home. The thoughts were painful, sharp as broken glass. She pushed them away and whispered her list instead. The names were familiar now, comforting in their constancy. Joffrey, Cersei, Ilyn Payne, the Hound. She looked at him, sleeping on the other side of the fire. His face was peaceful in the flickering light, almost human. Almost. But she knew what he was, knew what he had done. When they reached Robb, when she was safe, she would find a way to kill him. She promised herself that. They travelled for 6 more days. The land grew worse with each mile. They passed through villages where corpses hung from every tree, where dogs fought over human remains, where the smell of death was so thick it seemed solid. They saw survivors sometimes, hollow-eyed people who scattered at their approach like frightened animals. The hound ignored them all. On the 7th day, they came to a place where a battle had been fought recently. Bodies covered the ground, hundreds of them sprawled in the mud. Some wore Stark colours, some wore Lannister red. Most wore nothing recognizable, just rags soaked in blood. The hound rode through slowly, the horse picking its way between the corpses. Arya tried not to look, but she could not help it. The faces stared up at her, frozen in their final moments. Pain, fear, surprise, so many expressions, all ending the same way. "This is what war is," the hound said quietly. "Not songs and banners. This, mud and blood and boys dying for men who don't give a damn about them." Arya thought about her father, about honor and justice, and doing what was right. Her father had believed in those things, and he had died for them. These boys had believed in their lords, had fought for them, and they had died too. What was the difference? "Why do you fight?" she asked suddenly. "If you think it's all meaningless, why do you do it?" The hound was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I'm good at it. Because it's all I know. And because at least when I kill a man, I'm honest about it. I don't pretend I'm doing it for honor or justice or the gods. I kill because I'm paid to, or because he's trying to kill me. That's all." "That's not better," Arya said. "Never said it was, but it's not worse either." They camped that night in a farmhouse that still had most of its roof. The house was empty, the family gone or dead. Their belongings were scattered across the floor, abandoned in flight. Arya found a doll, small and crudely made, lying in the corner. She picked it up, stared at it, then set it back down gently. The hound watched her from the doorway. "You're getting hard," he said. "Good. Soft girls don't survive." "I'm not hard," Arya said. "I still feel things. For now, give it time. Give it enough bodies, enough blood, enough nights wondering if you'll see morning. It'll drain out of you. Happened to me. Happens to everyone who lives long enough." Arya thought about Harrenhal, about the screaming that had stopped bothering her, about the bodies she had learned to ignore, about the first man she had killed, and how little she had felt afterward. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was already hard. Maybe the girl who had left Winterfell was gone, replaced by something else, something that could kill without flinching, something that could walk through rivers of blood and keep walking. She did not know if that was good or bad. She only knew it was necessary. On the 10th day, they saw the twins in the distance, 2 great castles standing on either side of the Green Fork, connected by a bridge. Banners flew from the towers, too far to see clearly, but the hound had a spyglass. He studied them for a long moment, then lowered it slowly. "Stark banners," he said, "and Frey. Your brother's there, all right. Wedding's probably today or tomorrow." Arya's heart hammered. Robb, home, safety, the end of this nightmare. "Let's go," she said. But the hound did not move. He was still staring at the castles, his expression strange, uncertain. "Something's wrong," he said. "What?" "I don't know. Just a feeling." He shook his head. "Maybe nothing. Come on." They rode toward the twins as the sun began to set, painting the sky red and gold. Arya could hear music drifting across the water. Celebration. A wedding feast. Robb was there, laughing and drinking, surrounded by his men. She would see him soon, would be safe soon. She believed. That, right up until the screaming started. The music stopped. Chaos erupted. Arya heard shouts, the clash of steel, the roar of something terrible happening behind those walls. The hound reined in hard, his face going pale beneath his scars. "No," he whispered. "No, they wouldn't." But they had. The Freys had turned on the Starks, had slaughtered them in their own hall. Arya did not understand. Not yet. But she felt it, felt the world tilting, felt everything she had walked toward for so long collapsing into ash. The hound grabbed her, pulled her from the horse, started dragging her away. She fought him, screaming, trying to get to the castle, but he was too strong. "He's dead," the hound snarled. "They're all dead, and we will be too if we don't run." Arya screamed until her voice gave out, screamed until there was nothing left but silence and darkness and the knowledge that she had lost everything again. The road had led her here, to this moment, to this loss. And there was nowhere left to go but forward. The hound carried her away from the twins like a sack of grain, one arm locked around her waist while she kicked and screamed and clawed at him. She did not stop fighting until her voice gave out and her strength failed. Then she just hung there, limp and broken, watching the castle disappear behind them. The music had started again. Wedding songs, celebration, as if nothing had happened, as if her brother had not just been murdered with his men, with his wolf, with everyone who had followed him south. The hound did not stop running until they were miles away, deep in the woods, where the darkness was absolute. He dropped her then, breathing hard, his face twisted, with something that might have been fear or rage or both. "Stupid," he muttered. "Stupid, stupid girl. You would have gotten us both killed." Arya lay in the dirt where he had dropped her. She did not move, did not speak. Her mind felt hollow, scraped clean. Robb was dead. Her mother was dead. All the northern lords who had followed them, who had believed in them, dead. The Freys had killed them all under the sacred laws of guest right, had butchered them at a wedding feast like animals. "Get up," the hound said. She did not move. "I said get up." He grabbed her arm, hauled her to her feet. "We need to keep moving. The Freys will send riders. They'll hunt down anyone who escaped." "I don't care," Arya whispered. Her voice was raw, broken. "Well, I do. I'm not dying because you've given up." He shook her, hard enough to rattle her teeth. "You want to die? Fine. But not here. Not now. Not while they're still looking." He dragged her through the forest, and she stumbled after him because her legs moved, even when her mind did not. They walked until dawn, until Arya's feet were bleeding and her vision blurred. Then the hound found a cave, a shallow thing that stank of fox, and pushed her inside. "Sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." Arya curled into a ball on the cold stone and closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Every time she started to drift, she saw them, her mother, Robb, grey wind, all of them dying while she stood outside, helpless, useless. She had been so close to safety, to home, to everything she had been walking toward for months. And in one night, it was gone. The hound had been right. Soft girls did not survive. But hard girls did not get happy endings either. Hard girls just kept walking through blood and ash until there was nothing left. When she finally slept, she dreamed of the twins. Dreamed of the bridge, of the castle walls, of the music turning to screams. Dreamed of Robb calling for her, reaching for her, while she stood frozen, unable to move. She woke gasping, her face wet with tears she did not remember crying. The hound was sitting at the mouth of the cave, sharpening his sword. He glanced at her but said nothing. What was there to say? They stayed in the cave for 2 days, hiding while Frey patrols combed the countryside. Arya heard them sometimes, distant voices calling to each other, the sound of horses on the road. The hound kept his hand on his sword, ready to fight if they were discovered. But the patrols passed by, and they remained hidden. On the 3rd day, the hound decided it was safe to move. They emerged from the cave into a grey morning that smelled of rain. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds had fled. "Where are we going?" Arya asked. Her voice sounded strange, flat and emotionless. "The Vale," the hound said. "Your aunt's there, Lysa Arryn. She'll pay for you, maybe, or maybe she won't. But it's the only card we've got left to play." Arya thought about that. Aunt Lysa. She barely remembered her, a nervous woman who had left Winterfell when Arya was small. But she was family, the last family Arya had left in the world. "What if she won't take me?" Arya asked. The hound shrugged. "Then I'll sell you to someone who will, or maybe I'll just let you go." "Haven't decided yet." They walked east, toward the mountains of the moon, toward the Vale. The land here was different from the Riverlands, less devastated, less touched by war. But the people were still afraid. They shuttered their windows when Arya and the hound passed. They hid their food, their daughters, their anything of value. The war might not have reached them yet, but they knew it was coming. One afternoon, they passed through a village that seemed almost normal. The houses were intact, smoke rising from chimneys, children playing in the streets. For a moment, it was like stepping back in time, before the war, before everything fell apart. But then, Arya saw the gibbet in the village square. 3 men hung there, swaying in the wind. The sign around their necks said traitors. She did not know what they had done, who they had supported, why they had died. It did not matter. Someone had decided they deserved to die, and so they had died. That was how the world worked now. The hound bought bread and cheese from a baker who would not meet his eyes. They ate while they walked, the food tasteless in Arya's mouth. She could not remember the last time she had enjoyed eating. Food was just fuel now, something to keep her body moving. "You should eat more," the hound said, watching her pick at the cheese. "I'm not hungry." "Doesn't matter. Eat anyway. You're getting too thin." Arya looked down at herself. He was right. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. Her ribs showed through her shirt. When had that happened? She could not remember. She forced herself to eat the cheese, chewing mechanically. The hound nodded, satisfied, and they walked on. That night, they sheltered in an abandoned inn. The roof was intact, and there was even a working well in the courtyard. The hound drew water and built a small fire in the common room. They sat across from each other, the flames flickering between them, and for a while neither spoke. Then the hound said, "You should hate me less." Arya looked up, startled. "What?" "I saved your life," he said, "at the Twins. If I hadn't pulled you away, you'd be dead now, gutted like your brother. But you still look at me like I'm your worst enemy." "You killed Micah," Arya said. The old anger was still there, but it felt distant now, muffled. "I did," the hound agreed, "and you killed that boy at the river, and we've both killed others since. How many men does it take before we're even? Before you stop keeping score?" Arya did not have an answer. She stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. After a while, she said, "You're still on my list." "I know," The hound smiled, a bitter thing. But I'm not at the top anymore, am I? Too many others ahead of me now. The Freys, the Boltons, all the people who killed your family. He was right. Her list had changed. The names she whispered at night were different now. Walder Frey, Rose Bolton, Joffrey, Cersei. The hound was still there, but he had slipped lower, less urgent. She hated that. Hated that he could be right about anything. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Really, it's not just about the ransom, is it?" The hound was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled and popped. Rain began to fall outside, drumming on the roof. "Maybe I'm tired of being the villain," he said finally. "Maybe I want to do one thing that isn't completely rotten. Or maybe I'm just hoping your aunt pays well. I don't know. Don't think too hard about it." He lay down then, his back to the fire, ending the conversation. Arya stayed sitting, watching the flames until they burned low. When she finally slept, she dreamed of Winterfell, of her father in the Godswood, of Jon laughing, of Robb throwing snowballs. The dream was so real she could feel the cold, could smell the pines. When she woke, she felt worse than if she had not slept at all. They reached the mountains 5 days later. The road climbed steeply, winding through passes that seemed too narrow for the horse. The hound walked, leading the mare, while Arya trudged behind. The air grew thin and cold. Snow appeared on the high peaks, gleaming white against the grey sky. They passed clan villages, small clusters of stone huts clinging to the mountainside. The mountain clans were supposed to be dangerous, raiders and killers who preyed on travellers. But they left Arya and the hound alone. Maybe they recognized the hound for what he was. Maybe they just did not want the trouble. On the 8th day in the mountains, they came to a place where the road had collapsed. A landslide had torn away half the path, leaving a gap too wide for the horse to cross. The hound cursed and looked around for another route. "There," Arya said, pointing. A narrow trail led up the cliff face, barely visible among the rocks. "That's not a road," the hound said. "That's a goat track. It's the only way." He cursed again, but started climbing. The horse had to be left behind, tied to a tree with enough grass to keep it fed. They took what supplies they could carry and started up the trail. Arya went first, her hands and feet finding holds in the rock. The hound followed, struggling with his size and weight. Halfway up, Arya heard a sound, a low rumble like thunder, but closer. She looked up just in time to see rocks tumbling down the cliff face. She pressed herself flat against the stone as the rocks bounced past, missing her by inches. "Move!" the hound shouted. "Climb!" She climbed faster, her hands scrabbling for holds, her heart hammering. More rocks fell, larger ones, and she heard the hound grunt as one struck his shoulder. But he kept climbing, and so did she, until finally they pulled themselves over the edge onto solid ground. They lay there gasping, covered in dust, bleeding from scrapes and cuts. Arya's hands were raw, her knuckles torn. The hound's shoulder was bleeding where the rock had hit. "Stupid mountains," he muttered. "Stupid Vale, stupid everything." But they got up and kept walking. Eri appeared 2 days later, a white castle perched impossibly high on a mountain peak. It looked like something from a song, beautiful and pure and untouchable. Arya stared at it, feeling nothing. Beautiful things were lies. She knew that now. They climbed the final approach, a series of steep paths and narrow bridges that made Arya's stomach churn. The hound walked with one hand on the rock wall, his scarred face pale. He did not like heights. Arya might have found that funny once. Now it was just another fact, no more interesting than the colour of the sky. At the Bloody Gate, they were stopped by guards in blue and white. The hound explained who Arya was, and the guards looked sceptical. Then they looked at her more closely, at her face, her grey eyes. "Stark eyes," one of them said. "Could be." They were allowed to pass, escorted up the mountain by guards who said nothing. The climb took hours. By the time they reached the eyrie itself, the sun was setting, and Arya's legs were shaking with exhaustion. She was taken before her aunt in a hall of pale stone and cold light. Lysa Arryn sat on a throne, her son beside her. The boy was maybe 8, sickly looking, sucking his thumb. Lysa herself was older than Arya remembered, her face drawn and her eyes too bright. "Arya Stark," Lysa said. Her voice was high and thin. "My niece, I heard you were dead." "I'm not," Arya said. "I can see that." Lysa studied her, then the hound. "And you brought her here expecting what? Gratitude? Gold?" "Both would be nice," the hound said. Lysa laughed, a shrill sound. "I have no gold to spare. And as for gratitude, why should I be grateful? The girl is nothing to me. Her mother is dead. Her brothers are dead. The Stark name is dead. She's just another mouth to feed." Arya felt something cold settle in her chest. "You won't take me?" "Take you where?" Lysa asked. "There is no Winterfell any more. The Boltons hold the north. The Freys hold the Riverlands. The Lannisters hold the south. The Vale is all that remains free, and I will not jeopardize that for a dead house's orphan." "But I'm your family," Arya said. The words felt hollow, even as she spoke them. Family. Lysa's smile was bitter. "Family is what gets you killed in this world. Look at your mother. Look at your brother. They trusted family, and where did it lead them? No, I will not make that mistake. Guards, remove them both." The hound did not fight. He turned and walked out, and Arya followed, numbness spreading through her. They were escorted back down the mountain, back past the Bloody Gate, back into the wilderness. When they were alone again, the hound looked at her. "Well," he said, "that's that, then." Arya nodded. She felt nothing. Not surprise, not anger, not disappointment. Just emptiness. Every destination had turned to ash. Her father, her mother, her brothers, her family, her home. All gone, all dead. There was nowhere left to go, no one left to run to. She sat down on a rock and stared at the mountains. The hound sat beside her, saying nothing. They stayed like that as the sun set and the stars came out, 2 lost people at the edge of the world. Finally, Arya spoke. "What now?" The hound shrugged. "I don't know. Find a ship, maybe. Head east. There's nothing left here for either of us." Arya thought about that. East, across the narrow sea, away from Westeros, away from the war, away from everything that had broken her. "All right," she said. They walked through the night, heading toward salt pans, toward the sea. Arya did not look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing, only forward, only away. The girl who had left Winterfell was truly dead now. What walked in her place was something harder, colder, emptier, something that had learned the road's final lesson. Hope was the cruelest joke of all, and Arya Stark would never be fooled by it again. Salt Pans was burning when they arrived. The town sat at the mouth of the river, a small port that had once been busy with trade. Fishing boats should have crowded the harbour. Merchants should have hawked their wares in the streets. Children should have played by the docks while their mothers mended nets and their fathers unloaded cargo. That was what a port town was supposed to be. Instead, Arya and the Hound crested the hill overlooking salt pans and saw smoke rising in black columns against the evening sky. The smell reached them first, that now familiar stench of burning wood and burning flesh. Then the sounds, screaming, the clash of steel, the roar of flames eating everything in their path. Raiders, the Hound said quietly. He had stopped the horse, his hand going to his sword. Recent, maybe still there. Arya stared at the burning town. She felt nothing. Not horror, not pity, not even surprise. Of course salt pans was burning. Everything burned eventually. The whole kingdom was a pyre, and they were all just waiting their turn. "We should go around," the Hound said. "Find another port." "No." Arya's voice was flat. "I need a ship. Ships are there. Ships that are probably burned or stolen by now. Then we'll see." She slid off the horse and started walking toward the town. The Hound cursed behind her, but followed, leading the horse by its reins. They entered salt pans as the sun touched the horizon, painting the smoke orange and red. Bodies lay in the streets, men and women and children cut down as they fled. Some houses were already collapsed into ash. Others still burned, flames licking through windows and doors. Arya stepped over a dead woman clutching a baby. Both were still. Both were past help. The raiders were still here. She could hear them, laughter coming from somewhere ahead. The crash of breaking wood. A woman's scream, high and terrible, cutting off abruptly. The Hound's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. They found the docks mostly intact. The fire had not reached here yet, though smoke drifted thick across the water. 3 ships were moored at the piers. 2 were fishing boats, small and battered. The third was larger, a trading vessel with a painted hull and a tall mast. Men moved on its deck, loading cargo. Not raiders, sailors. "There," Arya said. They approached cautiously, the Hound's hand on his sword. A man stood at the gangplank, watching them come. He was older, his face weathered by wind and salt, his eyes sharp and assessing. He wore the clothes of a ship's captain, practical and well-worn. "That's close enough," he said. His accent was strange, lilting. "Bravosi," Arya realized. "State your business." "Passage," the Hound said. "For 2. How much?" The captain's eyes moved from the Hound to Arya, lingering on her face. "Where are you headed?" "Anywhere that isn't here," the Hound said. "That's not an answer." "Bravos," Arya said suddenly. The word came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere she did not know existed. "I want to go to Bravos." The captain studied her more closely. "That's a long journey for a girl your age. What's in Bravos for you?" Arya thought about Jaqen Hagar, about the coin he had given her before he vanished, the iron coin she still carried in her pocket. "Valar Morghulis," he had said. "All men must die, and if she ever wanted to find him, to learn what he was, she would need to go to Bravos." "A man I need to find," she said. The captain's expression shifted, something flickering in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or interest. "Show me your coin," he said. Arya reached into her pocket and pulled out the iron coin. It was small and worn, with a face on one side she did not recognize. The captain's eyes widened when he saw it. "Valar Morghulis," Arya said, the words coming back to her. "Valar Dohairis," the captain replied, his voice changed, respectful. He looked at the Hound. "What about you?" You coming to Bravos too?" The Hound shook his head. "Just need to get her on the ship. After that, I don't care where you're going. Then you'll have passage to Bravos," the captain said to Arya. "No charge. But we leave in an hour. The raiders will be back when they're done with the town. I don't intend to be here when that happens." Arya nodded. The Hound looked at her, his scarred face unreadable. "That's it then," he said. "That's it." They stood there for a moment, the Hound and the girl he had dragged across half the kingdom. They had fought together, bled together, survived together. And now they were parting, and neither knew what to say. "You should go inland," Arya said finally. "Find somewhere quiet, somewhere the war hasn't reached yet." "Maybe," the Hound said. "Or maybe I'll just keep doing what I do best. Doesn't much matter anymore." He reached into his pack and pulled out needle, still wrapped in its cloth. He held it out to her. Arya took it, the weight familiar and comforting in her hands. "Try not to get killed," the Hound said. "Would be a waste after all this." "You too." He turned and walked away, leading the horse back up the street toward the burning town. Arya watched him go. This monster who had killed her friend, who had saved her life, who had walked with her through hell. She felt nothing. No hate, no gratitude, no sadness, just emptiness. Then she turned and walked up the gangplank onto the ship. The crew moved around her, preparing to cast off. She found a place near the rail and stood there, watching salt pans burn. The raiders were still at work. She could see them now, dark figures moving through the smoke, carrying stolen goods, dragging screaming people. The town would be dead by morning. Another name on a list too long to speak. The ship pulled away from the dock, the sailors calling to each other in Bravosi. The wind filled the sails, and they moved out into the river, heading for the bay, heading for the sea. Arya gripped the rail and looked back at Westeros. The coast stretched away in both directions, a dark line against the darkening sky. Somewhere beyond it was Winterfell, or what remained of it. Somewhere was her family's grave. Somewhere was everything she had lost. She thought about her father, kneeling on the steps of the Great Sept. She thought about her mother at the Twins, dying with Robb's name on her lips. She thought about Sansa, still trapped in King's Landing, if she still lived. She thought about Jon, so far north he might as well be in another world. She thought about Bran and Rickon, dead in Winterfell's ruins, dead because Theon had betrayed them, dead because the world was cruel. She thought about all the people she had seen die. The butcher's boy, Micah, cut down for playing with a princess. Yoren and his ragged band slaughtered on the road. The prisoners in Harrenhal screaming in the darkness. The villagers, the farmers, the small folk who just wanted to live their lives and were crushed beneath the boots of lords and kings. The War of the Five Kings. That was what they called it. 5 men fighting over a throne, over a crown, over the right to call themselves king. And for what? What had any of them won? Renly was dead, murdered by Shadow. Robb was dead, murdered by the Freys. Balon Greyjoy was dead, fallen from a bridge. Stannis was still fighting, but he had lost everything that mattered. And Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne in King's Landing, a boy king who knew nothing of the suffering he had caused. 5 kings, hundreds of thousands of dead. Arya had walked through their kingdom, had seen what their war had done. The burned villages, the corpse-choked rivers, the children starving in the ruins of their homes, the women raped and murdered, the men hanged for choosing the wrong side, or for choosing no side at all. This was what war was. Not songs and glory and brave knights, not honor and justice and righteousness, just suffering, just death, just the strong preying on the weak, while the lords in their castles counted their gold and planned their next move. Arya had learned this lesson in blood and ash, had learned it in Harrenhal's torture chambers, had learned it on the road with the hound, stepping over bodies, watching the kingdom die one village at a time. She had learned that mercy was a luxury, that justice was a joke, that the only law that mattered was the law of the sword. And she had learned that she was not special. She was not protected by her name or her father's honor or the gods people prayed to. She was just another piece on the board, moved by forces larger than herself. The only reason she still lived was because she had learned to be hard, to be quiet, to be invisible, to be no one. The words came back to her, Jaqen's words. A girl has no name. She had not understood them then in Harrenhal. But she understood now. Names meant nothing. Arya Stark was dead as her family. What remained was just a girl, nameless and alone, with nothing but a sword and a list of people to kill. The captain approached her as the coast faded into darkness. He stood beside her at the rail, looking out at the same emptiness. "First time at sea?" he asked. "Yes," Arya said. "It takes getting used to. The motion, the sound, the endlessness of it. But you will. Everyone does." He paused, then added, "The coin you showed me. Do you know what it means?" "A man gave it to me," Arya said. "He said if I ever needed to find him, I should show it to a Bravosi and say the words." "Valar Morghulis," the captain said. "All men must die. It is the greeting of the faceless men. Assassins, some call them. Death's servants. They have a temple in Braavos, the house of black and white. Is that where you're going?" Arya thought about it. Was she? She did not know. She knew only that she had nowhere else to go. No family to return to. No home to reclaim. The only thing she had left was her list. And the only person who might be able to help her cross names off that list was Jaqen H'ghar. "Yes," she said. "That's where I'm going." The captain nodded. "Then I will take you there. When we reach Braavos, I will point you to the temple. What happens after that is between you and them." He walked away, leaving Arya alone at the rail. She stayed there as the night deepened, as the stars came out, as Westeros disappeared completely behind them. The sea stretched ahead, black and endless, lit only by the moon's reflection. It was beautiful in its emptiness. No people to kill, no armies to avoid, no villages burning, just water and sky and silence. Arya thought about who she had been. The girl who had chased cats in Winterfell. The girl who had dreamed of being a knight. The girl who had loved her family and believed in honor and justice. That girl was gone, killed by everything she'd seen, everything she had survived. In her place was something new, something forged in Harrenhal's fires, tempered on the King's Road, sharpened by loss and pain and rage. Arya did not know what to call this new thing, but she knew it was harder than the old Arya, harder and colder, and more dangerous. She pulled needle from its sheath and looked at the blade. Jon's gift, the last piece of home she carried. She ran her fingers along the steel, feeling the balance, remembering his words. Stick them with the pointy end. Simple advice, clean advice, the kind of advice that made sense in a world where nothing else did. She would keep needle, would carry it to Braavos, would learn to use it better, would make Jon proud, even though he would never know. And she would use it, would drive it into the hearts of everyone on her list, would watch them die one by one until the list was done, or until she died trying. This was her purpose now. This was what she had left. Not family, not home, not love or hope, or any of the things she had once believed in. Just revenge, just killing, just crossing names off a list until there were no names left. It was not much, but it was hers. The ship sailed on through the night, cutting through dark water, heading east. Arya stayed at the rail, unwilling or unable to go below. She watched the stars wheel overhead, watched the moon sink toward the horizon. She thought about everything she had witnessed. She had seen the kingdom from the ground, not from a lord's castle or a king's throne, from the mud and blood and shit where the small folk lived and died. She had seen how little their lives mattered to the people who ruled them, how easily they were sacrificed, how completely they were forgotten. The farmers whose crops were burned to deny them to the enemy, the villagers massacred because they had fed the wrong army, the children orphaned because their parents chose loyalty over survival, the women violated because soldiers needed entertainment, the men hanged because someone needed to blame someone for something. Arya had walked past their bodies, had smelled their rot, had heard their screams, and she had learned that this was normal. This was what happened when kings went to war. The lords in their castles made their plans, moved their armies, formed their alliances, and the small folk died, always the small folk, the nameless, faceless thousands who existed only to serve and suffer and disappear. She thought about Lomi, the boy who had walked beside her from King's Landing. Dead on the road, killed by Polliver for no reason beyond cruelty. She thought about the serving girls in Harrenhal, the ones who vanished into the torture chambers and never came out. She thought about Hot Pie, who she had left behind with the Brotherhood, hoping he would be safe. Was he still alive? She would never know. She thought about all the people whose names she did not know, the woman with the doll in the burned farmhouse, the man hanging from the tree in that first village, the children floating in the river, the bodies piled in the fields after battles that did not even have names. They were all gone, all forgotten, all lost to a war that would be written about in history books, without ever mentioning them. This was Arya's education, not the lessons Septa Mordaunt had tried to teach her about sewing and courtesy, not the lessons her father had taught about honour and duty. This, the truth of what it meant to be powerless in a world where power was all that mattered. And she had learned well, had learned to lie and steal and kill, had learned to watch people die without flinching, had learned that survival meant becoming something her family would not recognize, would not approve of, would maybe even fear. But her family was dead. Their approval no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was staying alive long enough to make the people responsible pay. The coast of Westeros was completely gone now, swallowed by darkness and distance. Arya stood at the rail, watching the empty horizon, and felt something shift inside her. A door closing, a chapter ending. She was leaving Westeros behind, leaving everything she had known, everything she had been. She was not running away. Running implied fear, implied retreat. This was different. This was strategic. She could not kill the people on her list as she was now. She was too small, too weak, too visible. But in Braavos, with the faceless men, she could learn, could become something new, something deadly. And then she would return, would come back to Westeros not as Arya Stark, but as death itself, would find Cersei and Joffrey and Walder Frey and all the others, would make them pay for every death, every scream, every moment of suffering they had caused. This was not the end of her story. It was a pause, a preparation, a sharpening of the blade before the killing stroke. Arya looked down at her hands in the moonlight. They were scarred now, calloused from work and fighting. They did not look like a lady's hands. They looked like a killer's hands. Good. That was what she needed to be. The ship sailed on through the night, and Arya sailed with it, leaving behind a kingdom that had already left her behind. The War of the Five Kings would continue without her. Lords would rise and fall. Battles would be fought and won and lost. The throne would pass from one unworthy person to another, and the smallfolk would continue to die, nameless and forgotten, ground beneath the wheels of power. But Arya would remember them, would carry their deaths with her, added to the weight she already bore, not because she was noble or good or heroic, but because their deaths proved what she had learned, that the world was cruel, that justice was a lie, that the only law was the law of the sword, and one day she would bring that law to the people who deserved it most. The eastern horizon began to lighten, the first hint of dawn. Arya had not slept, but she was not tired. She felt strangely clear, strangely focused. The numbness that had filled her since the twins was still there, but it no longer felt like weakness. It felt like armor, like protection against a world that wanted to break her. She would not break. She had bent as far as she could bend, had survived things that should have killed her, had walked through hell and come out the other side, changed but unbroken. And she would use that strength, that hardness, that cold certainty to do what needed to be done. The captain emerged from below as the sun rose, painting the sky pink and gold. He came to stand beside her again. "You should rest," he said. "It will be many days before we reach Braavos." "I'm not tired," Arya said. "You should rest anyway. You look like you've been awake for months." Arya almost smiled at that. Almost. "Maybe I have been." The captain studied her with eyes that had seen many things, many people. "You are very young to have such old eyes," he said. "What did they do to you, back there in Westeros?" "Everything," Arya said simply. He nodded, asking no more questions. He understood, she realized. He had seen refugees before, survivors, people who had lost everything. She was just one more. But she was not just one more. She was Arya Stark, last daughter of Winterfell, keeper of a list, walker of the broken road. She had witnessed the collapse of a kingdom from the ground, had seen what the Lord's ambitions cost the people they claimed to protect. She had walked through the ruins they made, had breathed the smoke of their burning villages, had stepped over the bodies they left behind. And she would remember, would carry that knowledge with her always, would never forget what the War of the Five Kings really was. Not a struggle between heroes and villains, not a grand tale of honor and glory, but a meat grinder that destroyed lives for nothing, for less than nothing, for the egos of men who thought themselves important. Arya Stark was dead. Long live no one. Long live the girl with the list. Long live the killer who would return to finish what they had started. The ship sailed east, toward Braavos, toward the House of Black and White, toward a future Arya could not see, but would make her own. Behind her, Westeros grew smaller and smaller, a dark shape on the horizon, a nightmare fading into memory. But nightmares did not die easily, and neither did Arya Stark. If you found this journey through the dying kingdom compelling, share your thoughts in the comments below. What moments struck you hardest? What did Arya's walk teach you about the true cost of war? Subscribe for more deep dives into the lives that shaped Westeros, the battles that broke it, and the survivors who carry its scars. Because the story of the War of the Five Kings was not written by the kings. It was written in blood by the people they destroyed, and someone needs to remember them. The road goes on, even after the story ends. Thanks for walking it with me. And so Arya Stark sailed away from Westeros, leaving behind a kingdom that had already forgotten her. A girl of 11 who had aged a lifetime in the space of months. A child who had walked the length of a dying realm and seen what the songs never sang about. This was not a hero's journey. There were no triumphant victories here, no moments of glory, no divine interventions to save the innocent. This was the story of a kingdom collapsing from the inside out, told through the eyes of one small girl who happened to survive it. The War of the Five Kings. History would record it as a struggle between great lords, a contest of thrones and crowns and armies. The maesters would write of battles won and lost, of alliances forged and broken, of kings who rose and fell like waves upon the shore. They would count the armies, tally the victories, debate the strategies. But they would not count the bodies Arya stepped over, would not record the names of the smallfolk who burned in their homes, who drowned in rivers choked with corpses, who hung from trees for choosing the wrong side or no side at all. Would not remember the children orphaned, the families destroyed, the villages erased from the map as if they had never existed. Arya remembered. She carried those memories with her across the narrow sea, etched into her mind like scars on flesh. The screaming in Harrenhal's dungeons, the silence of abandoned villages, the casual cruelty of soldiers and outlaws alike, the weight of a sword in her hand, and the knowledge of how easy it was to use. She had learned what her father never taught her, that honor was a luxury the powerless could not afford, that justice was whatever the man with the sword said it was, that mercy got you killed, and weakness got you worse than killed, that the world was not divided into good and evil, but into the strong and the weak, and the strong always, always won. These were hard lessons, cruel lessons, lessons that stripped away childhood and left something harder in its place. But they were true lessons, real lessons, the kind that kept you alive when everything else failed. The lords in their castles played their game of thrones, moving pieces across the board of Westeros. They spoke of honor and duty and the good of the realm. But Arya had seen the board from below, from the perspective of the pieces being moved and sacrificed, and she knew the truth they would never admit, that their game was built on bones, that their thrones rested on mass graves, that every crown was paid for in smallfolk blood. 5 kings went to war. Hundreds of thousands died. And for what? Who won? What was gained? Renly Baratheon, murdered by Shadow before he could prove himself anything more than a beautiful dream. Robb Stark, the young wolf who won every battle and lost the war, betrayed and butchered at a wedding feast. Balon Greyjoy, who took what he thought was his due, and paid for it with a fall from a bridge. Stannis Baratheon, who fought on, but had already lost everything that mattered. And Joffrey Baratheon, the boy monster who sat on the Iron Throne and knew nothing of the kingdom he claimed to rule. 5 kings. And beneath them the realm bled from 1,000 wounds, each one inflicted in the name of justice or honor or rightful rule. The Riverlands were a graveyard. The north was broken. The Reach and the Stormlands had poured their sons into the grinding wheel of war and gotten nothing back but corpses and grief. Even the Vale, isolated and safe, was touched by the rot spreading through the Seven Kingdoms. This was what Arya had witnessed. Not the grand sweep of history, but the small, brutal details. The mother clutching her dead child, the farmer watching his crops burn, the innkeeper hanged for serving the wrong army, the serving girl dragged into the darkness and never seen again, the boy killed on the road for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. These were the real casualties of the War of the Five Kings. Not the lords who fell in battle, whose names would be remembered and whose deeds would be sung about, but the nameless, faceless thousands who existed only to suffer and die and be forgotten. And Arya carried their weight, carried it across the sea, toward Braavos, toward a future she could not yet see. She was not doing it for them. She was not some noble champion of the small folk, some avenging angel sent to right the wrongs of the world. She was just a girl who had survived, who had learned to be hard, because soft girls did not last, who had a list of names and the determination to cross them all off. But in surviving, in witnessing, in walking that broken road from one end to the other, she had become something more than just a survivor. She had become a record, a living testament to what the war had truly cost. Not in gold or armies or castles, but in lives and innocence and hope. The kingdom Arya left behind would continue to tear itself apart. New kings would rise. New battles would be fought. New atrocities would be committed in the name of justice and honor and rightful rule. The wheel would keep turning, grinding up everyone beneath it, until someone finally broke it, or until there was nothing left to grind. But Arya would remember, would carry with her the truth of what she had seen. And one day, when she was ready, when she had learned everything the faceless men could teach her, she would return, not as Arya Stark, lost daughter of a dead house, but as something new, something dangerous, something the lords and kings and powers of Westeros would learn to fear. Because she had walked through their kingdom, had seen what they had made of it, had witnessed the horror they created with their ambitions and their pride and their endless hunger for power, and she would make them answer for it, not for justice. Justice was a lie, not for the small folk. They were already dead and forgotten, but for herself, for the girl she had been, the one they had killed, for the childhood they had stolen, for every step of that broken road, every corpse, every scream, every moment of suffering. The War of the Five Kings would end eventually. Someone would win, or everyone would lose, or the realm would simply collapse under the weight of its own corruption. But the scars would remain, carved into the land, into the people, into the very soul of Westeros. And Arya Stark, who had seen it all, who had survived it all, who had become something new in the crucible of that suffering, would carry those scars with her always. They would remind her of what she had learned, of what she had lost, of what she had become. The ship sailed on toward Braavos, toward the house of black and white, toward a future written in blood and shadow. Behind it Westeros burned, and Arya did not look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing, only forward, only toward the reckoning to come. This was the story of Arya and the broken road, the story of a child's tour through a dying kingdom, The story of how a girl from Winterfell learned the hardest lesson the world had to teach. That survival meant becoming something your family would not recognize, something you yourself might fear, something that could walk through hell and come out the other side not broken, but forged into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. The maesters would write their histories, the singers would sing their songs, but they would miss the truth. The truth was in the mud and blood and screaming. The truth was in the nameless dead and the forgotten villages and the rivers running red. The truth was in a girl with grey eyes and a list of names, sailing away from everything she had known towards something she could not yet name. And the truth was this: the War of the Five Kings was not won or lost by kings. It was endured by the people beneath them. And some of those people, like Arya Stark, would survive to remember. To remember, and perhaps one day, to repay. If this deep dive into Arya's journey resonated with you, if you see the War of the Five Kings differently now after walking through it at ground level, let me know in the comments. What moments hit hardest? What truths did you find in the broken road? And if you want more journeys through the hidden corners of Westeros, the stories the songs don't tell, the lives lived in the shadow of thrones and crowns, subscribe. Because there are more roads to walk, more truths to uncover, more stories that need to be told. The wheel keeps turning, the game goes on, and someone needs to remember what it costs. Thanks for walking this road with me. Until the next journey, Valar Morghulis.